welcome back. You're still watching Perspective with Etienne Turpin and Anna-Sophie Springer, and talking about the exhibition that is related to Wallace, 19th century naturalist. Is it naturalist or how do you?
Yeah, that's what we would
naturalist.
say. Yeah.
I was tempted to say biologist, but it's not so
Father
specific.
of biogeography,
Whatever.
Naturalist, entrepreneur.
Back to the exhibition, you were talking about arts being included. So how would you classify this event, this thing? Is it an exhibition to recount the travel, the experience itself, or is it, what's it? Is it art? Is it scientific? Is it, where does it lie?
I think it's all of those things.
That's ambitious.
It is an ambitious
It is
show.
an ambitious experiment with all of those levels coming together, coexisting in the same space, having a conversation. Why look at the travels? Why look at the story is what Etienne said earlier on, that we're interested in looking at this 19th century figure and drawing a line out to the conditions today, and talking about a person that encountered the birds of paradise, the first European that has an experience of birds of paradise in the forest, in the wild, by himself, discovers these for European knowledge and commerce and a form of extraction, passions. But then how does that transform relationships to the environment and to land use questions, to
Sustainability
And the fame of Indonesia. So Wallace, in fact, brought the first birds of paradise back on exhibition.
Right.
They were shown in the London Natural History Museum, and within 5 years of that time, Indonesia, under the Dutch colonial government, was exporting over 80,000 skins a year
For hats.
for hats. Exactly. And so this relationship of science and consumption, these are things that the artists are exploring.
Oh, okay.
And so we brought them into Lippi. They've met with scientists. We've provided them with a lot of different research materials. And then with their own practice, whether that's through textiles or video or sculpture,
right,
they've then brought their work through the Wallace discussion. And it's quite interesting.
So it's not actually 19th century recounted, but it's more contemporary in that sense.
It's very contemporary, but I think it's important to also have a point of reflection where we can say, for example, on the island of Sumatra, where Wallace was standing, recounting, tracking rhinoceros through the forest, what is there now? What is the condition of that site? And so we can say in 150 years, it would be difficult to find somewhere that has changed so much as in Indonesia.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
And the challenges of those changes and how we adapt to those land use imperatives and development, these questions, that's something that I think contemporary Indonesian artists are particularly good at responding to.
You have how many artists taking part in this?
So there's 14 Indonesian artists
14?
and 12 international positions.
okay.
And the 14 Indonesian are all new works.
New works?
Yes.
So it was specifically done for this?
Yes, commissioned for the exhibition, produced for the exhibition in close exchange with us and Salihara and the scientists at Lippi.
Art and science. Connection?
I think a lot of the scientists at first maybe think, oh, maybe you could do some illustrations for us.
Oh,
or
right.
there's a certain assumption that you would have an artist on board, right?
Okay, I see.
But I think now the relationship was quite interesting. The workshop that we did between the artists and the scientists, it was quite fascinating because maybe, I think actually now, the scientific imagination and its apparatus and its methods are actually influencing artists a lot more.
Right.
So how artists work through experimentation, how they try to appropriate some aspects of science. But I think ultimately the question is for both the arts and science, how are they allowing the public, our audience, to understand environmental change from Wallace to today, and for the future generations of Indonesia.
So it's a mean of communication, basically. Mean of communicating something.
Yes.
To the public.
Yes. And putting them in relationship to each other, actually, I think can make them both stronger.
I'm going back to the Wallace thing. I'm quite fascinated because I saw your background, and you have had a lot to do with Wallace. Talks, I don't know, books maybe. What's this fixation with Wallace? Like you said, maybe there was for many people, Wallace has an attraction as a figure, as a hero, something like that. But what is it for you guys?
Well, if somebody collects 125,660 specimens, then that is a huge body of research.
Right.
And so basically we've been working on this project with the Salihara exhibition as the focus point for 2 years.
2 years?
And so in this course of 2 years, we've been going to lots of academic conferences, to arts events, to other kind of public situations with elements of the research and process, and sharing that, and always been in conversation with scientists like George Beccaloni at the Natural History Museum in London, and growing the project through these exchanges. So that's all part of this. It's all very connected, and I would say it's one research.
But it's not just that. I think it's important to say he's a protagonist in the show. But we're not trying to make him a hero or say, oh, this scientist.
The focus is on his work rather than a person.
And his practice, his attention, his narrative. I think there are so many things that are still completely relevant from his practice as a scientist, as a naturalist. But also that it helps to have a protagonist that you can follow. So through the exhibition, you can see him in different regions, talking about in Sulawesi, or talking about Papua, talking about Java as the greatest tropical island on Earth, and the way that he...
That was a long time ago.
But then I think it's quite interesting for our audience and visitors to the exhibition who say, oh, I'm from there, like what was of interest to him only 150 years ago, and is that there now? What is the situation? And so we're trying to bring out some geographical connections by following his route, but then there's also quite an openness of your itinerary in the exhibition maybe is more interested in video art and butterflies, while another visitor has a beetle fixation and wants to see more works about the history of science. So we create a lot of relationships, but it's quite open of how you navigate.
Okay. Is out of curiosity, actually, when did you first hear about him?
Well, I mean, Wallace is quite a famous figure in the history of science.
Right.
But conveniently, before I was on my way to Indonesia, I came across a copy of his Malay Archipelago.
Right.
And since we began working on that project two years ago, it's such a rich text.
All right, I agree with that.
It's such an amazing narrative, and one that I think really puts in perspective the speed of change that we're encountering in the world today.
Okay. We have to break again. Just 5 seconds. We'll be back. Please stay with us.